Hello everyone and welcome back to History's Tech, and today we are looking at the M48 Patton, the United States' first generation main battle tank. Now this is the tank that pushes the United States away from the old way of thinking involving tanks, in which you have a variety of tanks such as light tanks, medium tanks, heavy tanks, and super heavy tanks, and pushes them towards a singular universal tank design known as the main battle tank. And this is following in the British development of the main battle tank in the early 1950s. This tank would end up replacing almost every single type of tank in the United States inventory, with the exception of a few specialized tanks still being needed for various roles. But let's go ahead and look at how we got to the M48. Now, the M48 was developed to replace four tanks, the M4 Sherman, the M26 Pershing from World War II, and later on the tanks designed to replace those two, the M46 and M47 Pattons. Now, all four of these are medium tanks, and essentially the M48 is a type of medium tank. However, it replaces the old view of a medium tank as a singular role and replaces it with that of the universal tank, which is a multi-purpose role. Now, when the United States decided to switch over to a main battle tank, they actually had various options. They, of course, could have gone with the T-42, which was supposed to be what was going to replace the M26 Pershing. It just didn't happen on time, so they were still developing it later on. So the United States decided to go ahead and try and upgrade the T-42 with the T-69 tank, which actually included a unique feature of an 8-round drum autoloader. However, the T-69 was plagued with many of the same problems that the T-42 had, including just a high rate of component failures, which meant that when the Army was testing these things, it was just one problem after another, so they ended up pretty much abandoning the T-69. Now, the program that did seem to have the highest chance of succeeding was known as the T-48, and this was essentially following the same method used to make the M47, which was an improvement of the M46. They were going to take an M47 and improve the performance of its engine and basically attach a new turret to it and have a new tank. However, once Chrysler Defense got their hands on the contract for the T-48, they began to do a lot more than just the improvements over just the turret and the engine. Now, of course, they did improve the engine with a much better, much more powerful engine with a better transmission, and yes, they did redesign the turret. In fact, the new hemisphere-shaped turret actually had a much lower profile and made it less vulnerable to attack. Additionally, weapon storage within the tank was redesigned to allow it to not only handle more ammunition, but handle in a much safer manner. So while it was supposed to be an M47 in name, it ended up becoming an entirely new tank all of its own. Now, the tank was actually still in development when the Korean War broke out, and there had been plans by the U.S. Army to build as many as 9,000 T-48s and rush them into production. However, testing didn't end until the end of 1955, well after the end of the Korean War. However, this was not the end for it. They continued to develop and build it due to the threat of the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe. Now, the interesting part of this was they actually began building the M48 Patton, the earliest model of it, in 1952 when they hadn't even finished testing the prototype. And because of this, as they were building M48s, they were actually improving them due to issues they found with the prototype T-48s. So the early model M48s, the M48, M48A1s, continued to show issues that they were actually finding with the T-48. Now, by the time the M48 finally saw combat, many of these early issues had been solved, and it proved to be the main weapon of both the United States Army and the United States Marine Corps during the Vietnam War. In fact, the first Patton units deployed during the Vietnam War were with the U.S. Marine Corps' 1st and 3rd Tank Battalions in 1965. Also during the Vietnam War, they would be provided to the South Vietnamese Army, where in April of 1972, they would become the victim of the first ever portable wire-guided anti-tank missile. While wire-guided anti-tank missiles are common nowadays, at this time this was a revolution in tank warfare and would lead to changes in all future tank battles. Now, after Vietnam, the M48 would continue to have a long career, including fighting multiple conflicts, including the Indo-Pakistani Wars, the Six Days War, the Yom Kippur Wars, and actually was used by Pakistan at the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. However, most armies had phased out the M48 by the early 90s. Now, very much like one of the tanks that replaced the M4 Sherman, The M48's platform was actually utilized for multiple different tanks. Now, these included everything from the M67 flamethrower tank, nicknamed the Zippo, the last flamethrower tank produced by the United States, to the M48 flail tank, which was created by Germany and actually is still in service to this day as an anti-mine vehicle, to what has to be the coolest anti-aircraft weapon I've ever seen in my life, the M48 GAU-8. And if you know anything about the GAU-8 Avenger, you know that is the main gun of the A-10 Warthog, and they tried to slap it on top of an M48. They even had a prototype and everything ready to go. However, the project was abandoned in favor of the M247 Sergeant York, which basically mounted a dual Bofors cannon as a more practical anti-air solution. However, both of these projects would be abandoned in favor of anti-air rockets. Today, there are actually still some operational M48s in the world. About 8 countries still operate them as an active combat vehicle, with 2 countries, Germany and Poland, utilizing the mine-clearing version only for a support role. Today, if you are looking for one in the United States, you're pretty much only going to find them in museums and memorial pieces, as they have no use in the modern military for the United States, and most of them ended up becoming targets by the United States Army and Marine Corps. But there you have it, a quick look at the M48 Patton, the United States' first-generation main battle tank. A tank that, even though the United States didn't utilize it for very long, it still has a long-lasting legacy, being utilized as an active combat vehicle in 8 countries. And as these vehicles continue to get some type of upgrade, including being equipped with M60 turrets, they will probably continue to have a long life. But that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.